Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my stalwart companion with me today, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
I found an old directory on my Google Drive of stuff I wrote and then emailed to myself or to other people. And one of the things I found was the thing I wrote for Wraith.
Mm.
That is some depressing beep, man. That is. Whew. I was reading that going, oh boy.
So right in line with Wraith.
Oh yeah. It is right there. But it was like, I'm sitting there going, I want to go back in time and say, hey, do you need a hug? And then I realized, yes, pretty much always.
And joining us today on our journey is a person who was kind enough to step in last week and spend some time with me, and you'll be seeing a lot more of in the near future. Another one of our lore-focused folks, or at least lore enthusiast people, Eric O'Day. Eric, how you doing?
My directive is to podcast. Great to be here, Joe.
Yeah, Eric is, turns out, also a lore enthusiast, has written plenty of stuff for the website revolving around that, and has done some really great work. Highly recommend going to the website and reading some of Eric's pieces, as well as some of the stuff that, Matt writes, because out of the three of us, they write. I don't anymore.
Yeah, I write occasionally. Joe does back end, and Eric actually really does write for us.
Yeah. Today we're going to be not answering your questions because, well, I'm chalk out of them for now, which means I'm going to beg you at this point to send us questions or episodes that you want us to theme around. If you have an idea, you can go ahead and send those suggestions or questions into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. We ask that you specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us up on Discord, we have the Q&A Podcast Questions channel set aside for everybody to do so. Same rules apply. If you are a Patreon subscriber, you get the access benefit to the patron Q&A Podcast Questions channel. We tend to look there first. It's our extra way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. You can also send us messages through Patreon and make Liz send them to us, which is always funny because Liz always just kind of sends them off like, I found this for you, and it makes me happy every time that I get something from Patreon. But today, we don't really have a lot of that to talk about. Instead, I figured with the timing of the pre-patch and with the War Within winding down, it would be a good chance to sort of kind of review the story so far, talk about the things that have happened in the War Within, whether they pulled on something in the past and bring it into the current, or what they're kind of setting up for the next expansion in Midnight or beyond, because there's a lot of stuff that has happened in what feels like a very short period of time, if I'm being honest. So the opening of the expansion, and I'm just going to kind of start with the beginning because that seems like a good place to begin, is with the visions of Azeroth, where people across Azeroth are starting to experience strange visions and hearing a song, the Radiant Song. Several high-ranking NPCs, such as Thrall, Jaina Proudmoore, Anduin Wrynn, they hear this song, they receive these visions, and they know instinctively that they're from Azeroth, which for Jaina doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I understand she's a very powerful mage, but it always seemed a little weird that she would understand that it was immediately from Azeroth. Thrall makes perfect sense. At one point in time, he joined with the Dragon Aspects to help forge the new way to destroy Deathwing and all that stuff. So if you've ever read the book involving that, he was absolutely connected to Azeroth in all sorts of weird and wacky ways.
My response to this is crude, and so I'm not going to say it, but it's got something to do with Jaina's dating history. Let's say.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that. And then there's Anduin Wrynn, who, is at this point having a crisis of identity, hasn't figured out who he is anymore after being driven around like the worst drone in all of history in Shadowlands. And then,
I'm going to argue with you. He was a great drone. He was extremely effective at everything the jailer wanted him to do.
Yeah, that's fair. I can't really argue with that. But they all go and they seek Magni out because Magni is the speaker of Azeroth. He has been able to communicate with Azeroth's overworld soul in the past, and he's been silent for several years at this point. he winds up getting injured as he tries to commune with Azeroth. They relocate to the floating city of Dalaran, home of the Kirintor mages, along with Magni's daughter, Moira, and her son, Dagran Tharisian II, heir to all dwarven thrones, minus really the Wildhammer, but I'm sure he'll get married into that one. That'll be fun. They consult Archmage Khadgar and Ilaria Windrunner on how to proceed. Magni awakens to explain that Azeroth warned him that dark forces underneath the surface of Khazalgar are sort of forming and causing this distress. And so we do whatever we do whenever there's a problem and we happen to be in the middle of Dalaran. We teleport it in the middle of whatever conflict we're going to, because this makes perfect sense to the heroes of Azeroth.
I honestly feel like a lot of the time nobody bothers to actually ask the quote-unquote heroes of Azeroth. They come up with a plan and then they inform you that they're going to do it. And then you're like, and the next thing you know, you've been transported to the middle of a bug-filled nightmare war. Kudos to that, guys.
Involuntary road trip if you're in the city that's taking the road trip.
Yes, exactly. I feel like there's a lot of that amongst the the higher muckety mucks of Azeroth. Is this tendency to be like, they'll figure it out. We'll just get there and they'll just run out. Maybe there's a pet somewhere they want to adopt. It'll be fine.
Yeah, and then so we wind up going and teleporting Dalaran. We do the things that they ask us to do. We realign these wards that are going to reinforce Azeroth. We teleport to the location that we've been given, and then all heck breaks loose. You wind up seeing all the wards fail. The Archmage Drendon turns out to not actually be Drendon, but instead be Xal'atath in disguise, because as we called it years ago, Drendon was actually dead because nobody had seen him for a while, and then he just mysteriously shows back up. Nothing suspicious there at all, clearly. I can never remember because there are too many bug races. What was the one that she was working with here, Matt? Help me out, or Eric, help me out here.
Nerubians. They're the Nerubians.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they wind up assaulting the city, and then the resultant explosion of Dalaran occurs. And this is our opening salvo into the War Within, which I think all of this setup is actually relatively important to a lot of stuff that is going on in the past and will happen in the future. We talked a little bit about it with the Kirintor trying to rediscover who they are and what they are, which is profoundly calls to me in many, many different ways. But also it's the death of an icon without the death of an icon, if that makes sense. A lot of times in Warcraft's history, if they wanted to drive a point home, 9 times out of 10, they killed an important NPC. Somebody would die that was, beloved, and that would get an emotional response. Here, they destroyed Dalaran, which did get an emotional response and is, in many ways, as much of a character as some of the other NPCs. But I thought it was a really nice touch to blow up a city instead of killing off a character. I know that seems like a weird thing to say, but I thought it set the perfect tone for this expansion. So that was the first part of it. What did you guys think, or did you have anything to add that I missed? Eric, start with you.
Yeah, knowing that a place like Dalaran that we've been to so much, that has played a big part in a lot of different expansions, isn't safe, doesn't have plot armor, can be destroyed, not just like kind of destroyed or kidnapped, but like vaporized, is like a really good start to an expansion and a trilogy to say you don't know what's going to happen and nothing is safe. And we did get Khadgar also vaporized at the same time, so it was kind of a 1-2 punch of Khadgar seemingly not being around anymore at the same time that Dalaran was reduced to, a couple of crystals and towers on the shore.
I'd argue that we saw Khadgar get sucked into a magical artifact and not necessarily die. And one thing that I have learned from TVs, movies, books, and video games, if there's no body, the kill is not confirmed. So
right, if we moved on a bit quick and there was no, stopping, then we probably will not have heard the last of that character. It's true.
Yeah.
Well, plus there's the whole thing about even if you do have the body, are you sure it's not a clone?
Yeah, that's true.
Is it an extra dimensional copy? Let's run down the list, guys.
Well, one day when we talk about the lore of Lorwyn and Magic the Gathering, I get to tell a whole story about that. Anyway, please, Matt, your take.
Well, I mean, I don't. If Eric had more to say. I don't want to stop it, so I'm going to say, were you done, dude?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. My take is actually surprisingly non-complicated. I think it is like that meme where somebody's like, "Why would you do something so shocking and yet so brave?" It's this moment of, you like this city, right? You've been there a lot. You've gone to this city like multiple expansions now. Boom, it's done. You're not having that city anymore. You get used to figuring out a new city's, geography, because this one's not going to be it. And I say this in a sarcastic manner, but I don't mean it that. I think it was a good choice both to do, as Eric said, to set up a new trilogy with a feeling of there are some stakes, but also to give a sort of a warning that you will not, that when we go back to a place, it does not mean that the place, it's not going to just be a visit. Like, we know in the next 2 expansions, we are going back to places. We know this because we know we know a lot about the opening of Midnight now. We know we're going to be in Silvermoon, and stuff is going to change in Silvermoon.
Mm-hmm.
The entire forest, there's going to be changes. Things are going to get altered. We don't know what comes after, but we do know that we're going to go see the Haranir at some point. So there's a lot of potential for new and interesting changes. And we know from leaks now that Blizzard did. Blizzard did a video. They put it up. They gave it to... which was it, Pez Raider? I don't remember. No, he's not. For one thing, he doesn't even work there anymore. And he was Diablo. Anyway, there's a video of them working on stuff for Northrend. And so we know there will be something in Northrend. And
one of the things they suspected.
One of the things they even said was that people's acceptance of things in the War Within, specifically, is what got them to think, okay, if the opening of the War Within can, if shows us this, we can then see what will happen in Midnight. And when people, said, "Ooh, Silvermoon, that's great," for the War Within going into Midnight, that means people are now even more open going into the third one to see something like Northrend again. It was a way of setting up an expectation of even the old familiar stuff is new now. In my opinion, that's one of the things it was doing.
Agreed. I think those are all very good points for both of you. From here, we are then greeted, after defending our way against the Nerubians, we are greeted by a very skeptical group of Earthen. This is the main initial, I guess, I don't want to say conflict, but developing personality trait of Act 1, now that the prologue is done. We are brought into the city to talk with the officials. They saw us fighting off the Nerubians. They know that we're not necessarily enemies, but we're not quite friends yet. And we are brought into Khazalgar and the Isle of Dorn, where we get to meet all of their leaders and learn about all of their problems, including the fact that they dogmatically follow teachings of the Titans. And there are some weird, I don't want to say cultural, but I don't know a better way to phrase it. There are rituals that they partake in that seem odd. And I think it's framed in such a way of being odd intentionally, and that plays into the story where, like, their bodies will give out and they will, and I'm going to air quote, die. But then their memory crystals, a piece of them that contains their personality and memory, are committed essentially to a vast library. And then other Earthen are born later. There's an entire system for this in one of their underground facilities that is a Titan facility that essentially produces a new Earthen. You get to learn all about their society. You get to learn about how some of them have actually given up on following the Titans. These are sort of outcasts. And those outcasts live at, like, sort of the outskirts of the Earthen society in these small villages, sometimes near mining facility or mining areas where they, subside essentially, because they don't eat food, they eat rocks. So mining is essentially farming to them. And then you find out that one of those in exile is a former leader of the council, or one of the leaders on the council of the Earthen. One of the, I can't remember her name, but she's essentially their healer. She's the one that, thank you. so you meet her and you understand some of the struggles that some of them literally don't believe that following this dogmatic set of rules is how they live. It's not what they want. And I think that is really interesting. And it's a great way to have a conflict outside of a military conflict where it's not necessarily these people are having a civil war. It's these people have a difference of ideology that has caused a schism. Friends and lovers fall on other sides of this big line, where some will can maintain their life in the city following whatever role they were chosen, and some want to define themselves beyond that role, which I thought was really neat because it's not a concept that has been explored very often in Warcraft. Really, I want to say the Nighthold and the Nightborn were really one of the first that really sort of did that in an in your face kind of way. So I really liked it. How did you guys feel about the introduction of the Earthen? Start with Matt.
Am I going this first? Or?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. One of the things I liked about the Earthen was the fact that their conflict was ideological rather than martial. They weren't enemies. They were competing points of view, and in some cases they'd hurt each other. Like when Edelgard and her Stormcaller ex-boyfriend, whose name is I'm not getting at the moment.
Stoneward Belgrim.
Thank you. When Edelgard and Belgrim meet again, there's clearly tension between them, but it's not hate.
Yeah.
No, it's not hate at all. And as Belgrim sees what she's living like, he starts to question. He's like, wait a minute. You can do this? Because it's like, to him, it seemed absurd. Like, it was like saying, we're going to stop letting gravity pull us to the ground. He's like, what do you mean you're going to stop letting gravity pull you to the ground? You can't. That's what gravity does. But here they are, all walking on ceilings from his perspective. And I liked that. I liked that it unfolded. I also liked that over time, you found out that even other members of the council weren't necessarily as committed to the whole ideal.
Like the one that led a dual life. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting.
He's literally simultaneously the oldest member of the Council of Dornegal. He's Merrick's Council Ward Merrick's. I went and looked it up. And at the same time, he is like secretly doing things behind the scenes. It's like, we must keep to the ancient ways and they must keep working. But since everything is secretly broken, I have to nudge it into the proper place. Yeah. And so there's a whole wide variety of responses to this idea that we were created by the Titans for a specific thing, versus there is no evidence that there is any specific mission for us anymore. There's no orders are coming. Our spirits are no longer being added to the repository. We have no purpose. And so should we just continue to follow directives that don't seem to apply anymore? Or should we keep going that way? And it's gonna, like I said, it's a nice conflict. I think when Belgrim dies,
Belgrim.
It's Belgrim. Yeah, when he dies, I want to call him Belgrim so bad. When he dies, his death, and I feel like that might be a little bit of a spoiler. I'm sorry, guys.
We're talking about the story so far, so I think we're good on that.
He goes out saving everyone, especially Edelgard. He's saving everyone, including surfacers, which is what they call the outcasts who've left the city and gone out into the Isle of Dorne. He deliberately makes the point that it's for them too. Whether or not he agrees with what they're doing, they're still his people. They still need to be protected. So yeah, there's a lot of variety to it, and there's a lot of nuance to it that I liked. And I mean, it's kind of hard to say that you don't like big rock dwarfs. I mean, it's just kind of hard to argue that they're not fun. So yeah, I think that's basically it for me right now, at least in terms of that response. I do wish we gotten to see more with them than just the opening salvo of the expansion. There's a ton of stuff I want to know that I don't know.
Eric?
Yeah, I agree that it first it just seems that they did not just do, hey, there's a new race. It's dwarves made out of rocks. And we hadn't seen them before because they're on this island that we didn't visit before. They have like an interesting story that hooks into everything we've been doing for years. and then you talk to them and they're okay, they're robots, they talk kind of weird, but it's like so much more than that, and they're having this sort of cold civil war, almost the disagreement, because they've been cut off for thousands of years since the Sundering. They have no connection to the Titans or the Keepers. They're just on their own, and they've started to question what they're doing and started to have these schisms of, I think we should keep doing it even though we don't know if it's right. Well, I think we shouldn't do it because we don't know for sure that it's right. And then having all these events happen really quickly and seeing them reunite and kind of go forward, was a really it was really good to see, like, right away in the first act here. I thought it was really well done, and I enjoyed it.
From here, we wind up working our way through some of the other introductions. We learn about the Great Causeway, or Coreway, excuse me. We help repair that. We reunite the underground with the top of the surface world. We bring all the speakers essentially together after helping with their various trials and tribulation. We meet the Algari offensive, or in this case, the Arathi. We meet them fighting their own war against the Nerubians. Rather vicious battle and war. And we get to see Anduin interact with other people who wield the light in a new and interesting way with a new perspective. We joke a lot of times that this is the part of the expansion where Anduin gets his groove back, but it kind of is, because up to this point, Anduin as a character has lost faith in himself, is not necessarily calling upon the light. One, because he thinks he can't internally, but also he feels like he's not worthy, even though he's not really vocalizing it. And we've seen that his wounds have not really begun to heal because all the people most important to him don't necessarily understand his perspective. Jaina can understand to a point. Turallion can understand to a point. Gen Greymane can understand to a point. His father would have been the best to walk him through this, but unfortunately his father is gone. And so he's been struggling with this identity of self. He meets the Arathi. He starts learning about their way of culture, how they view the light. And then meeting Fayin. I think it was Fayin.
Fayin.
Yeah, Fayin Lothar. She is the one that sort of breaks it down for him. It's the light doesn't abandon you. The light is the light. You choose whether or not you open yourself to it, and your scars are preventing you from opening yourself. That's understandable. Every warrior bears wounds. And she says this as she's sitting there with one arm and still bringing joy to children, still preserving life, still ready to meet the front lines of battle, and still finding that the how to be human, or, and I'm air quoting human here because Arathi are essentially half elves.
Yeah, the Arathi in this game differ from the original Arathi in that they are descendants of them, but also of high elves that left with them.
And you see this like light bulb moment with Anduin, which then leads him to get back in the fight, essentially. After all this is done, we wind up going back over to the Earthen. After a big, long conversation about what's going on in the world, they decide that it's time to break their isolation and reject the Titans' dogmatic rules. There's a ceremonial breaking of the disc, which is where all these these rules and regulations sit. And then in that moment, a Titan construct of immense size tries to destroy all of the Earthen.
Someone broke the disc. Broke the disc. Yeah, it was very much like, it was, the Titan disc narked on us, guys.
And these are two important set pieces. And the reason why I'm kind of not rushing, but kind of cramming them together is, on one hand, and Matt and I have talked about this a lot in the past, the light is often given this sort of like holier than thou, this big cosmic plus side. And we don't really talk about negatives like people who follow it tend to be very, I guess, very worshipful of it would be the best way to put it. And the Arathi, while they view the light in a positive light, I know I said light a bunch there, they're more practical in their approach to it. They almost view it not as a divine source of all things, so there is an element of that in their hierarchy, but it's a tool. It's something that you call to it. It doesn't necessarily have a will of its own. And then you have this where you have the Earthen break this titanic hold that has given them their directives, that has dictated what their lives must be, taking sort of that free will back and then being assaulted for it. These are two really large defining moments for two really large entities, the Light and the Titans, because the Titans have also been viewed in sort of a reverent way for so long. And we've gotten little bits and pieces, especially with what happened with Tyr and the Watchers, and learning that maybe everything wasn't all sunshine and roses with them. But now this is confirmation of it. They literally built a kill switch, and we don't know which Titan did it, but
Well, we don't even. Yeah, the weirdest thing is we don't even know if it was one of the big Pantheon Titans.
yeah,
We know from other stuff that we found during Dragonflight that Odin was doing stuff involving other places with other Earthen who did not want to conform to the way Odin was trying to run things in Northrend.
the prison island, air quote, the one that we are currently on.
Yeah, but it's very clear that from the perspective of the Earthen on this island, they weren't prisoners to anything. The Titans told them to come here. The Titans told them to do that. Which leads me to the wondering of if Odin was somehow working against the people that had sent them. And there's a lot of potential there. We don't know the answer to it, but it is interesting in that it doesn't jive with other things that we found, but we know in the past that other things we found have been lies from time to time. So that's a thing to keep in your mind going forward. Also, I think one of the things that's really fascinating about the dual Titan and Light revelations is there's this whole bit about, the Arathi are very, as you said, they're very practical, they're very pragmatic. They view light as metaphorical fire. And the thing about fire is, obviously, fire is great for a lot of things. Keep your house warm, light the darkness so you can look outside and see predators. A big old bonfire will keep the whole area nice and bug-free. There's lots of good reasons to have fire. Cook your food. Help you make stuff. Like there's certain things you can only make by heating them up, and boom, fire's great for that. A lot of good reasons to have fire. But if, you wake up and your barn's on fire, suddenly fire isn't your friend anymore. And I think that's kind of, there's a sense of that is part of the Arathi mindset towards the light. Like, I think I would not be surprised to find out that at some point light worshippers fought light worshippers over there. Because there's a sense of, yes, the light is great, but you run the show. You cannot let it run the show. And that kind of goes along not just with what you're talking about, but in other stuff we've seen, like, say, all the way back to, I want to say, Battle for Azeroth, when we first saw the Maghar homeworld, and how the army of light there was just complete fanatics. They were just destroying the world to save it. And it feels like that we've seen that in Legion, too, with Zera, trying to force Illidan to become good by just jamming him full of light. And, it's the light is not the boss. You can't let a cosmic force be your boss. And I think that's something that they're trying to incorporate here, because it's kind of easy with stuff like the Void, because the Void's just so malevolently over the top that it's not hard to convince people you probably shouldn't do what it says. But to convince people, you shouldn't do what the warm food maker does. Like, what it tells you should ignore that. You should make your own decisions. Like, but it wants to make me food. I also want to make me food. Great, make food. But when it wants to burn down your house, tell it no. No, we're not burning down my house. I like my house. It's where I keep my food.
It reminds me of the joke of my wife asked me why I kept a gun next to the toaster, and then I laughed about it, and she laughed about it, and then the toaster laughed about it, and I shot the toaster. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
There's been a lot of groundwork laid lately about the light isn't necessarily good all the way through, or the Titans, nor order, and these kind of things to see that they might have agendas, that they might be hiding things, that there might be, like, we talked about last week that Turalyon and Arator have different ways of seeing the light and approaching the light and using the light, and the Arathi kind of fall more towards the Arator side. It's the light is a tool to be used. Does it have a mind of its own? Does it want something? Is it sentient? Like, what could it be? So I feel like that, and with what the Titans are doing, they're answers that we're going to have to get eventually to understand what's been going on in these chapters that we're playing now.
Yeah, agreed. And that's another theme that actually kind of feeds into the first raid tier and what we wind up doing there as well, because we're actually wind up assaulting Azj-Kahet, which is the bug city, essentially. It's where the Nerubians live in this hollowed out cave that I still maintain is where an old god was ripped from the earth at some point. Time will tell if I'm right about that or not.
Perhaps one with 7 heads. We don't know.
Yeah, perhaps a weird tentacle from a 7-headed one. But there.
Before you go on, I gotta say this. This is something I've wanted to say for a very long time. I think Queen Ansarek deserves the award for most horribly tragic betrayal in World of Warcraft in quite some time.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a second.
I just had to throw it out there. I felt like physically sick when I found out what had happened to Ansarek.
No, that was Queen
Not
Neferis.
Ansarek, her mother.
Neferis,
yes.
yeah.
Neferis, yes.
Ansarek is the evil one. So we wind up going in and we wind up thinking that we're just going to assault the Nerubians. But instead, we find that there is actually a resistance happening. Not all Nerubians believe in their new Queen Ansarek's vision for the future, that the black blood, as gifted by Xal'atath, that has become active as of recent, will transcend them into new and more powerful forms so that they can rule the world. No, they just want to not be involved in this. And so there is a resistance fighting back against the queen and her machinations and her alliance with Xal'atath. And it's not just little folks. It's folks in prominent positions of power, generals, masters of their spydom. You're talking about essentially the top brass leadership of this like entire culture, and they're like, yeah, we're different from you, but we don't want to serve an old god. We remember what happened when we served them, and I tell you, it wasn't by choice that we did that, which I also think is interesting because that's something up until this moment we've speculated, right? We've talked about
especially because I remember you brought it up. I want to make sure Joe gets credit for this. I remember you brought it up during the time travel stuff in Dragonflight. In particular, you were like, when we get to the war between the elemental lords and the old gods during the Black Empire, there's a lot of evidence that the old gods just compel everything all the time. And you made this specific point about how this could mean that we have, the fact that the empire lasted for as long as it did.
Yeah.
Like there were people in it obeying it. It wasn't just a bunch of old gods sitting around, yammering at each other. They had nations at their disposal. So yeah, it is one of those things I'm glad to see it getting more of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, but this was that confirmation moment, and so then we aid them, right? We help them break free of their essentially tyrannical rule, where we've learned that the queen has been abducting citizens and experimenting on them with black blood, trying to force evolution. We learned that this may actually be where faceless ones come from, which I also thought was really interesting because faceless ones have been sort of this nebulous entity that we've always associated with the old gods, but now we kind of have an idea why, that these are mutated even further by using old god blood essentially to make a perfect soldier, amping up their rage, basically turning them into voidy the hulks, right? But still controllable by the will of the old god. We break them free. We find out that Neferis, the queen that is mother to Ansarek, who was killed at the beginning with the assistance of Xal'atath, because Ansarek is very, very ambitious, is not actually dead, but was one of the chief experiments, might have been the actual first experiment, because Neferis was not willing to work with Xal'atath, wanted to not be involved in that. We wind up going to slay her, and Ansarek reaches out and begs Xal'atath for more power and for help, and Xal'atath goes, nope, you did what I needed you to do. I'm outies. leaves her to die at our hands, and we free the Nerubians from the control of both the black blood infused horror of their queen Ansarak, but also Xal'atath is no longer feeding them lies or her own manipulations, and we effectively stop a war. Right? It's one of the few times we can honestly say we did something good without leaving it worse than we found it in the game, which I think is also important. But again, it's that concept of we might not actually know everything about everything. And this started with Shadowlands. And a lot of people, while you didn't care for that expansion, reading the grimoire and going through the actual themes of what's happening there, you realize you don't know the universe quite like you think you do. And this is even further confirmation of this, which I think is really important. Eric, I don't know how you felt about this part of it.
Yeah, I feel like the ongoing storyline of the Black Blood and what it can do, and it being, remnants of old gods, is just, it's the mirror of the old gods trying to corrupt Azeroth, and the Titans trying to, use machines to pump order into Azeroth. Like, they're really trying to influence it and claim it. And what we've learned about the World Soul, it was just really interesting to see through this whole chapter what the Black Blood can do, how it can change and influence living things, and how it's, we've been rid of, quote, rid of the old gods for expansions, and some of them for thousands of years, and their influence is still driving the events of World of Warcraft. So it's not like we wiped them off and we've moved on. It's just still there. It's underground, seeping through everything. It can be used by someone who comes down with that same kind of power to, make entire armies more powerful. So I thought that was a good thread through, instead of just, Xal'atath casts a magic spell and makes them more powerful, that she was using part of Azeroth to empower them.
Matt, did you have anything to add to that before I move on to the next section?
I don't know if it's adding it, but one of the things I really like thinking about when I'm thinking about all this is Warcraft 3. Specifically, the first time we meet the Forgotten. The Forgotten One is a giant heap of tentacles in the middle of nowhere, on the way to Icecrown Citadel, which at the time wasn't Icecrown Citadel, it was just Icecrown Glacier. You see Arthas and, his buddy Anubarak, the Traitor King. I love that part. Was the Traitor King? What? How do they know me? No, they're talking about me. Sorry, man. But on their way through the Underdark, as it were, they run into the Forgotten One. And there may be more. We only know about the one that appeared in that game, but the Forgotten One had an entire group of Faceless Ones. In fact, that's where we first started calling them Faceless Ones. It's in that game. And I remember, and I'm looking it up to make sure that I'm right, Anubarak calls the Forgotten One an unfathomable horror of a long forgotten time. And between the fact that it's got what we now know to be the Naraki aiding it and serving it, Naraki and the Faceless Ones are the same thing. It's the word that the old gods used for the Black Empire used for these beings. And that to me is interesting, because what is the Forgotten One then? Is it an old god? We haven't actually. It can't be Yogg-Saron, because we know where Yogg-Saron was, and he was actually underneath most of Northrend. There's not like one pocket of him. The Forgotten One is said to be its own being, so that's interesting. And it also has Naraki serving it, which is also interesting. And we know that Yogg-Saron had Naraki because both he sent two, Zakajaz and Kithix. I can't stop saying it, Zakajaz. I'm sorry. He sent them after Tyr's buddies, and Tyr and his friends, his amazing friends, when they were on their way south. This was before the Cataclysm, so it was just south on the same continent. But regardless, all of that connects up, and that's interesting. But the fact that we see an actual specific Naraki, the Skulking, I believe he's called. I can't remember. Neltharak? Is it Neltharak? Xal'atath. Okay, I found it. Xal'atath the Skulking. and he's a big Naraki who's getting summoned into the Skittering Breach, which implies, as Joe pointed out, it implies that the Naraki are created using the power of the Black Blood, and they know how to use it to make more. And it is in fact from them that Ansurek has been seeking knowledge of how to create her own powerful abomination monsters, which I think is, I feel like it's a really nice deep cut, and it could go a lot further. And I'd really like to see where it goes. So
I think we need an Azeroth genealogy episode where we talk about all the
things,
races are connected and branched out and who came from what, because...
And the idea that with the idea that the Black Empire, the Nerubians were like, we're kind of done. Thanks. We had the old gods. We get it. We know what that's about. We're kind of not really interested in Act 2. When you come back and it's all that again, not that wasn't great, but it wasn't. We don't like it. I like that there's that, to a certain degree. Going back again, this is another thing. Going back to Mists of Pandaria with the Mantid, your gods are not our gods. But here the Narubar are saying, yeah, it's true that our gods are not their gods. That doesn't mean I need to pray to our gods. Mm-hmm. Our gods ain't great. I'm not going to go pray to their gods either, but I'm certainly not going to go pray to those guys. And I really like the idea that you could be an abomination created from a horror from beyond reality itself and still be like, I like having substance. Don't you? Come on, Tentas. You like having a body, right? I didn't want to admit it, but it is very convenient for my collection of sashes. I have a lot of sashes on. I like them. I like the ones that got wrapped around my tendrils, too. Those are some great tendril sashes, my man. Do we want to give up tendril sashes for Ubalax over there? Nah, you're right. I don't want to do it. So,
what has Ubalax done for me lately?
Yeah. Whatever did he do for us? He used to eat our young. He made our young just to eat them. The fact that we got to exist at all was because he couldn't eat all of us. Yeah. If Ubalax was fatter, we'd have been in trouble. Yeah, you're right. I'm just not down for that guy. Yogg-Saron? He wasn't good either.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid theme. And I think it was very, very... It was an interesting and eye-opening moment for a lot of players, because I remember we got a lot of comments about people who had never considered, Nerubians or, other void or old god created entities to be good. And yet here we are, where it's like they're not good or bad. They have the capacity for both, just like we do. And it's laid bare before them, which is another theme that's carried over into the next section, where we find out that Gallywix, the trade prince in charge of essentially all of Undermine and all of the goblins, has now been in league with Xal'atath, because one of the things we did was we broke her bauble and she needs to get it fixed. And in exchange for profitable weapons, Gallywix is supposed to fix it for her, which he does. But we also wind up encountering goblin resistance, which Gazlo and Renzik have been sort of laying the groundwork for a while, explaining, we were not necessarily doing this willingly. And then you get scenes of Gallywix literally extorting the cartel leaders to follow his marching orders, or else. And that or else isn't necessarily just their own lives. When you get to Undermine, you see that their people, their cartels, are not exactly living the best life. And if they go against the grain, they get the clamps, so to speak. And so, again, we join this resistance and we help free the cartels. We bring their people to safety, their family members out of wherever they're being held as leverage from Gallywix. And we go and overthrow Gallywix. We essentially destroy him with his own mech, and we do his body is underneath his mech at the end, and it is at 0 hit points. It is not at 1 hit point like Sylvanas was when we took her out. It is at 0. So in theory, he is gone. And then we see that Undermine starts to come back to a semblance of itself. And again, it's that theme of breaking off the shackles of oppression to sort of find your own destiny again. And even Gazlo says that. He's like, I don't know what we're going to be, but wherever it is, it's going to be our choice. And that's all we can ask. which I thought was another really powerful moment. And a lot of people were very upset that we went to Undermine instead of some other places, thinking that it didn't make sense. But in the theming of the expansion, it made perfect sense and pulled on something that has been in place or been building since Cataclysm, right? Undermine, the whole society, everything that happened, the surge of power that Gallywix seized, all happened during Cataclysm. Battle for Azeroth further cemented that when, Gallywix started messing around with Blood of Azeroth, essentially the same thing as Black Blood, just Titan adjacent instead of Old God adjacent. More power, more knowledge, more pressure and leverage over his own people. So again, that sort of refreshing of that free will, which was so important now. Again, that theme carries through. And I liked the side quest here, I guess I'll put it, the little side diversion, because it wasn't just about chasing Xal'atath, although that was very important and was part of it. It was about helping another group of people reclaiming autonomy. And again, we left the place better than we found it. I love that seems to be a theme of this expansion, because man, do we fail at that every other time. What did you think about this, Matt?
I think for me, the best part of this whole thing is getting to see Baron Revelgaz again. And indeed, the story of the politicking amongst the various trade princes, and you never know who's going to stab who in the back. You never know what machinations are up to, in play. The fact that I didn't respect Gallywix, his acumen, nearly enough. Like I thought of him as a clown.
Yeah, everybody thought he was a clown, but that was part of his power, right?
Yeah. I think to a certain degree he was constantly underestimated, because he did ridiculous things. I mean, come on, the Pleasure Palace, the turning this Ashara into a horde symbol. I mean, you cannot defend these decisions until you defend them as propaganda for how dumb he is. And if you keep people focused on how quote unquote dumb you are, they will think you're dumb and you'll keep on going.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, I really thought, like, the fact that, I'm trying to think of, like, the one who got murdered.
Renzik?
Yeah. I think it was Renzik. Yeah.
It was Renzik. Renzik was murdered because that was a big emotional thing for both the Alliance and the Horde.
Yeah. And plus, I mean, Renzik was trying to, like, basically get get the goblins to realize we don't need to be subservient. We can be in the people, and that means even from our own trade princes.
For context, Renzik was the goblin member of the Covert Alliance intelligence faction SI7, the only one. Just going against the grain
until the midnight when they become playable. No, I'm kidding. I don't know anything like that, but I just thought there was a lot of really good moments. I liked getting to see Revelgaz again. I felt kind of bad that his cow got kidnapped, because you don't want to steal a man's cow. I shouldn't be saying that. He was a Tauren and a very, very fierce warrior. But there's just like a lot of interesting stuff. Revelgaz even tried to deal with Renzik and Gazlo somewhat fairly, and I don't know. I always liked Renzik. So, and then when he died, while he was protecting Gazlo, we get to see his family. No, it was Renzik who died. Sorry. No, we get to see Revelgaz and the others. We get to see the goblins actually come together, which is not something I ever thought I would say in my life. And they don't come together out of greed. This is not, look how greedy we are. They all like, you know what? No, this ain't us. This, whatever we are not toadies. We do not lick boot. We do not, we are not so greedy that we will let you debase us. And I liked that too. I mean, that's a good story element. I'm not sure what's happening with Gallywix's daughter. I know that she got murdered, so I don't really know what's going to happen next. They say that she, I don't know. I don't know what's going to be happening. So, and that's also kind of like what Joe was talking about before. We see over and over again in this expansion that stuff happens that you might not have thought could happen. Like Gazlo dead, Not Gazelle, sorry. Gazelle's still alive. Sorry, guys, I didn't mean to freak
Gallywix.
out. Gallywix is dead. His daughter died. I didn't even know he had a daughter. Like, was she his daughter or his cousin or what? What was she?
I don't remember, but it's not necessarily relevant.
But, we see a lot of people died and almost died. Just a lot going on here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Eric, did you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just real quick, the whole chapter here was awesome. I loved Undermine. I loved the vibe. I loved that it didn't really seem like too much of a side quest because it was still chasing after Xal'atath and the Dark Heart. And I like that it kind of took Xal'atath back a peg. That she was kind of her footing because Illyria was able to damage the Dark Heart and she couldn't fix it on her own. Like, up to this point, she's been one of those all-powerful, like, has an answer for everything.
10 steps ahead type, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, by everything you've done this expansion is exactly what I wanted you to do. You've been playing into my hands the whole time. Destroys Dalaran in 5 minutes. And then to have her not be able to repair the Darkheart, to need to go to the goblins and see that, they originally helped Neltharion make it, and so she has to go to the source. I really like that. The fact that she couldn't just be like, ha ha ha, and snap her fingers and continue using it. And that drove the story.
I'm so sorry about that, since you said that. They outmaneuver her. She straight up loses the Darkheart to other people because of them.
Another faction comes in and sees an opportunity and, yeah, does that. And she isn't ahead of them, and she doesn't even count them in. She gets betrayed by them, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm agreeing.
Yeah, which I think is important, and I think we should move along to the last section here, which is the Ghosts of Koresh, because as the hunt for the Dark Heart is now on, as void ethereals have in service to Dementius, a void lord, and I'm going to air quote there because we don't necessarily know everything about Dementius at this point. We know a bit more than we did before, but we then give chase to Koresh, or the remnants therein. This is the world of the ethereals that was blown up, and we come to find out that the ethereals' homeworld was blown up on purpose to try to stop Dementius, and it did. Because Dementius was feeding on the world when it was blown up, feeding on the world soul of Koresh, which is our first and only time we've been having any sort of a confirmation that Koresh was a world soul, which is interesting in and of itself. But again, there are themes here as we go through where we begrudgingly start to work with Xal'atath because she knows. We find out that she was involved, as was Locust Walker, in what happened to Koresh, as well as the air quote saving of the people, giving the ethereals the power and method to turn themselves into the ethereals so that they could survive what was to come. And then also essentially move the plan ahead to try to destroy Dementius, because she was essentially a herald of Dementius at some point, and didn't really like that gig, which seems to also be a theme with her as well. We learned that the oaths of the ethereals hold power in this moment. We learn about their history and the such like the Wastelanders being formerly devout priests of the world soul of Koresh, the elite guard that served their kings, and the upper crust and elite, and how their vows, even now in this moment, can twist them and force them to do stuff that they necessarily wouldn't do. We wind up getting betrayed by some that we bring into the fold, which we kind of expected to happen, but not in the way that it happened. The ones that wanted to bring Koresh back to life are now siding with the void ethereals because the king, which I can always call him Salad Bar, but it's Saladar.
Yes, it is Saladar.
But Saladar has become void infused, is a servant of Dementius, and he starts twisting the oaths that they made to him to then force them to do dark bidding. And it's an interesting exercise in how far that control, that those compulsion magic essentially works, because as Matt pointed out, and I'd like to give Matt credit for this as well, This is very similar to domination magic in those oaths, where they are binding contracts of magic that essentially are able to compel somebody to do something against their will, which was a very interesting parallel, or at least I thought so.
Everyone, come on, group hug.
Yeah.
I love you guys. Even you, Eric, and I just really only met you a couple months ago.
We wind up going through. We have this big plan to destroy Dementius. We to get the Dark Heart back. We siege the Mana Forge. We work with the Ethereals to make this happen. We work with Xal'atath. We free them. We give them their hope back. Xal'atath double crosses us exactly as we thought she would. Makes off with the Dark Heart, as well as Dementius sucked into the Dark Heart, which I think is also fascinating, and I'm sure will not come back to bite us in the butt. Saladar is sucked into it, as well as a bunch of the other Void Ethereals and other Void entities amassing in this power that Xal'atath is gathering. In the cooldown from it, we've given the Koreshi people hope. We work with, why can I not remember her name from the Maw?
Venari.
Thank you. We help Venari with her revitalization project, and there is actual hope that the world soul can be reformed and regrown, and that Koresh can be reformed around it, giving the people of Koresh, the Koreshi people, a real home again. And again, they get to choose their own fate. They're not beholden to anything. And in this moment, we also learn that the brokers and the ethereals are two parts of the same people, which is also fascinating, learning that Venari and the brokers and all the cartels are just like the ethereals. They just happen to don a different suit, still made out of pure energy, still using science and magic to get where they need to go. But everything they were doing, including that whole dealing with live animals, that we were kind of curious why brokers in Shadowlands were going after all these different entities from all these different planes of existence and different realms. Now we know they were looking to essentially rebuild and repopulate Koresh, which was really cool, eye-opening moment for me, and a really cool story beat, because we always thought Venari and the brokers were on the shadier side of things, and they are. But there's this weird, almost altruistic movement behind it, where it's like, yeah, we're going to rebuild our world, and we need this stuff to make it happen, including bees. Go get us bees. Which it was just a really interesting moment. And while I know a lot of people were upset that we went to Koresh now, me being one of them, the story theming was still in line with everything else, which is breaking peoples from the shackles of oppression to give them hope for a future. And again, a rare instance occurs, maybe not so rare these days, where we leave a place better than we found it. As the oasis begins to flourish, we can only assume that the ecodome that surrounds it will get bigger and bigger and bigger as more land is reclaimed and revitalized throughout the process of Koresh healing, which I thought was an interesting way to end the expansion, a sort of ray of hope as we go into potentially one of the darkest moments that we're probably going to be facing. And Eric, I don't know, what did you think of the third act or the final act here in this expansion?
I feel like we learned a lot and we got a lot of development on a lot of different fronts, with the brokers coming back in and finding out that they're also from Koresh. The biggest one for me was just finding out that the World Soul is still there and it's still alive, and we don't know what will become of it. Will it become something that lots of cosmic forces descend on to try to claim, or is that only Azeroth because Azeroth is super special and Koresh is now damaged, or now almost dead, or wasn't worth it in the first place? Dementius was just having a snack on his way by. Like, what? I wonder how much, as we move on to other places, we'll get development on what becomes of that World Soul. Like, how often will we go back to visit it? Will we have to wait years? Will we get some story here and there? So that was the biggest one for me. The betrayal of Xal'atath, coming out of the raid and saying, "Just kidding, I'm going to be your enemy again. Thanks for working with me. I was 10 steps ahead of you the whole time." That was, we all saw that one coming, but I just liked a lot of the big story steps forward and the tying together of things that seemed completely disconnected for a while. I mean, we heard about Koresh how many years ago? 17 years ago. if I emailed you from now to 17 years ago and said, "Hey, we're gonna go there in 2025," would you have believed it? Like, I like those kind of things where you finally follow up on a tidbit that becomes a whole entire patch.
Matt?
I have several things I wanted to say. The first of those, I want you to imagine Xal'atath and Venari staring at each other across a warehouse, and Xal'atath going, "Come on, join me, Venari. We're both somewhat against the current order," and Venari going, "Hey, I may be a criminal lunatic, but I'm a Koreshi criminal lunatic," because that's the vibe I got from Venari throughout her appearance in this expansion. Yes, she's ruthless. Yes, she will take advantage of anyone she has to get what she's trying to get, but she's like in it for which, into her mind, the right reason. And I really adored her. Like, go work with that thing, and then when it finally shows its true colors, please kill it. You go do what you're gonna do, but remember, when it turns its back on you, stab it. So that they're right there. Venari A++, Chef's Kiss would adventure alongside getting bees again. Maybe not. Maybe next time we could do something other than bees. I don't know. There's lots of things we could get, Venari. I know you know this. So that's right up front. 2, Nexus Walker. Worst mentor ever in a series that has
Locust Walker.
Oh, sorry, yes, Locust Walker. My bad. Sorry, Nexus Walker. Locust Walker, in a series that has no end of terrible mentors, or even good mentors who screw up at a key moment, he is like Chef's Kiss bad. It's like, thank you for destroying Illyria's, belief that we should stop Xal'atath. That's great. That's great that you've confused everyone. Wonderful job. As for Dementius, I have no doubt that he is a Void Lord. And the reason I have no doubt is that I don't think that the thing we fought is even close to all of Dementius.
By definition, it can't be.
Yes. Moreover, I don't think the thing that we fought was all of Dementius before they destroyed Koresh to shatter him into a billion pieces, one of which we fought.
Agreed, because there's a moment that I just real interject for those at home. The part of the reason is we have been told, and maybe this is incorrect, maybe this will be retconned, but that Void Lords cannot exist in the Prime Material plane, and when they do put bits of themselves into the Prime Material plane, they become old gods.
In terms of this, I think the case is that he was attempting to get around the manifestation by just eating a world soul.
Yeah.
Because we've seen before, world souls can kind of break the rules. You can send a world soul to a universe where it shouldn't be able to go. World souls can do a lot of things. They're sort of like the Infinity Stones if they could grow up to be really smug about things.
Which would also feed into why the Void Lords are so obsessed with like Azeroth and other Titan planets. And why we've seen that in the past is because that's how they get there, right? That makes a lot of sense.
And it would also be interesting in the whole idea that we know a loon at one point killed one, or at least she gave somebody the power to kill one.
Which would arguably be that her power is capable of destroying them.
Yeah. But all of that comes around to the fact that what I really think is fascinating about all of this when it's all said and done is that, yes, we leave Koresh better than we found it. Although it would have been hard to leave it worse than we found it. It wasn't doing well. And we have given them hope, but it is still, like, I don't expect the next time we see Koresh, everything's going to be sunshines and lollipops. I mean, this is a long-term project they are engaging in. But as much as I did love Koresh, much more than you did, I have been convinced that story-wise, it was a real swerve. And ultimately, it's just because it feels like it belongs in the saga, but it doesn't necessarily, like, it kind of feels a little bit like we went there to go there.
Yeah,
because that's where we ended up going. They didn't really give us a real strong hook to connect it. Xal'atath's there. Oh, now we're working with Xal'atath. What? I feel like there could have been some more work done on that.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons, and I'm not going to beleaguer the point because I want to take a couple moments because we're definitely over time, but I do want to finish the thoughts of. I always felt like this Koresh would have been a better opening salvo to Midnight. Because it starts.
The problem was that they didn't have anything else ready to go.
Yeah, and I think that's right too, because I mean, one of the things, and this is where we're going to talk like loose threads from this expansion and what's going forward is sort of the lead into that. And we know that we're going to deal with some of this stuff. Like the Black Blood is a loose end, and it's a pretty major one. It's we are supposedly we were going to go back and deal with the Haranir. Orina, we're gonna meet up with them. She's gonna go back and talk with the elders and get them to talk with us so that we could figure out what's going on with it, so we can get it to be dormant again or solve that problem. Which to me would have been a logical climax to the end of the expansion, because it follows that thread through, and it also is that thread through of Orina is sort of the outcast because she does things that her elders tell her not to do. They hold a very traditional line, and this is where we're supposed to be. This is what we're supposed to do. And she sort of throws that out the window and chooses her own path. But we know that we're going there. We know that we're going to deal with the Haranir. We're going to bring them into the fold, and we're going to deal with the Black Blood because that is their primary concern. So we are going to get that sort of resolved. We know that we're going to be dealing with Xal'atath in a lot of ways in the very first act. I don't think that we're going to be done with her in the first act of Midnight. She is far too clever a villain and far too important to sort of get done in the first act. Plus, I think what she is not necessarily purely a villain, because again, between between lore walking and what we've seen and heard from her in the past, Xal'atath doesn't lie. She's ruthless, but she doesn't need to lie. At no point in time did she say she wants existence to be non-existing. She doesn't want it to be gone. In fact, a lot of the things she's doing seems to be counter of the Void Lords, be against them. And we don't know why yet. And I think that's what we're going to start to find out as we start going through this war between the Void and the Light, because that's what the opening the opening salvo of Midnight really is. The true essence of the Light and the true essence of the Void, and these two opposing forces and everything that's caught in between. And Eric and I talked about this a little bit when we talked about the novel last week, when we talked about Blood Ties. Highly recommend you go back and listen to that episode, and highly recommend you go and listen or either listen to or read the book, because it sets this up as well. And that sort of power struggle and everything that gets caught in between it is the backdrop of the opening to Midnight. And we're going to explore those relationships. We're going to explore that. And it's going to pull on these threads that we've not just seen started here, but have been in place since Burning Crusade, that got revisited in Battle for Azeroth a little bit, that got revisited in the Shadowlands, because there was a lot of theming around that was sort of even a secondary story, like a tertiary story, an undercurrent between the Void and the Light as well. And then we saw pulled on desperately in the basically everything we did up to this point, that we're going to get these payoffs potentially of stuff that's been happening forever, including, like Matt said earlier, we know we're going to Silvermoon City. We know we're going back to the Sunwell. The Sunwell was an incredibly important part of an entire expansion and an entirely important storyline dealing with the Blood Elves, that, bringing them the redemption, bringing them into the fold, and what happened afterwards. And all of this is prime setup for it, which I guess you would kind of expect from the opening portion or the opening expansion of a trilogy. I'll toss it over to Eric. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I am interested to see basically what we've been chasing is Xal'atath and what she's up to. She's been empowering the Dark Heart. She's had setbacks, and now she's got Dementius inside of it, the power of the essence, whatever she absorbed. And what we know about her motivation comes from Eridicron, all the way back at the end of Dragonflight, when the Dark Heart was first being empowered. He just looks at us and says, with this, Xal'atath is going to claim Azeroth, and the Titans will show up to defend it, or reclaim it, or something. And then he walks away, and we haven't heard from him since. So what about the Sunwell is going to let Xal'atath either claim or get closer to claiming Azeroth. And the other really interesting thing that happened right at the end in the epilogue in the lead-in quest is that she summons Voidstorm, which we know is a zone we're going to in Midnight, and it seems like she just uses all the power in the Darkheart and then drops it on the ground, and it's drained. And was that what she needed all that power for? All the expansion and a half of gathering the power just to summon the Voidstorm, and now she can really move on to her next step in her plan? Or is she going to suck the Voidstorm back into the Darkheart with the power of the Sunwell? Like, what's going on here? So that's what I'm thinking of heading into Midnight.
Matt?
The Black Blood is definitely something that needs to be dealt with and explored more as a storyline. But I have some questions that I've been thinking about. The first one is this. Did you know that with simple Cajacola, you can stabilize Black Blood so you can make weapons out of it? Tell me more, Matt. I will.
Cajacola, otherwise known as other Azerite? Question mark.
Yeah, Kajamite in the Cajacola stabilizes the Black Blood, and we know that it tends to boost intelligence or even just straight up pop ideas into your head. Like if you hang out around Kajamite a lot, inhale it or drink it or what have you, you'll start having all sorts of ideas you didn't have before, which is where most of Goblin technology came from. And what's interesting to me is Jaster Gallywix, y'all remember him, we left him crushed under his own robot in Act 2 of this whole thing, had a big old piece of Azerite on his staff before the Cataclysm, before any of it had gotten to the surface. That makes me think Azerite is essentially similar to the Black Blood, but for Titan. Is Kajamite really Kajamite? We're calling it Azerite because it seems to draw upon the power of the World Soul. But if it's Azerite because it draws on the power of the World Soul, is Kajamite Titan blood? Because we know Titans died in that war. Remember the Master's Glaive?
Mm-hmm.
There was a big old god, but a Titan died putting him down. And we've heard that multiple times. There's that whole deal if you go back to the Xal'atath in the original game, that whole bit about, Titan met an old god in battle and the Titan fell. And I'm not just referencing one of my favorite video games, guys. I really do feel like there's a possibility that Kajamite is the Order affixive. And that's one of the reasons, maybe that's why it does what it does. Why does it make people smarter? Because it gives them ideas. Why does it give them ideas? Because it's affixative.
Mm-hmm.
And if you use it, you can glue things to this reality. Like that you make the Black Blood more stable. Could you use it on Azerite? And if you did, what would it do to it? Because Azerite doesn't need to be more stable. Would it make it less stable? Does it change its, for lack of a better word, equilibrium? This is just all, like the fact that there's a whole bit where the goblins are out there MacGyvering the Black Blood with soda, and that's how they're fixing the Darkheart this whole time. They fixed it with soda. And that's not a joke, and nor is it funny. It's actually really concerning. I want to see more about this. I'm interested in Haranir, but I don't. One of the things I'm hoping they don't do, which they so far haven't done, is they haven't forgotten all the people and places that were already involved in things. And I like that streak to continue. I want to see the full breadth of the whole Night Elf, the whole Blood Elf starting zone, all of that stuff. I want to see all of it, see where it goes. And then I want to see what we have after, because you got to admit, the War Within really changed between acts. Like it Act 1 and Act 2 barely connected. Act 3, it's on a different planet. So I am curious to see how the throughput to new acts works for Midnight.
Yeah, and it's going to be an interesting ride. I'm looking forward to seeing where the story goes. We're not going to talk. We're going to try to avoid spoilers in the future until people get a chance to actually, play, because several of us have been playing the beta, and the story definitely develops quickly, and I definitely have strong feelings about a lot of it. We're going to try to be chill as much as we can. But But I think that's going to do it for us today. Friends, I do want to thank you for joining us. Again, Lore Watch and all of our stuff at Blizzard Watch is only made possible due to your generous contributions and support at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. That support allows us to do shows like this, as well as to continue to develop and grow our community and our offerings for that community. By being a Patreon subscriber, you get exclusive benefits like early access to all of our podcasts. You get an ads-free site experience on the website as well. And you also get direct access to us in a lot of ways to ask us questions and get priority on those questions or themes of things you want us to cover. And again, if you do have questions or themes for this podcast, there are several ways to send it in. You can send them in at podcast@blizzardwatch.com, specify the show that it is for, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also hit us on the Discord, which is the Q and Podcast Questions channel, open to everybody, same rules apply. And then we have the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel set aside for our Patreon subscribers as a little extra thank you for helping us keep the lights on. Again, friends, thank you for your continued support. Eric, thank you for joining us on this journey. You all will be hearing more from Eric as he is joining our team here. And I'm looking forward to what the future will bring. With that, friends, we'll catch you next week.